Let me now return to the question with which we began. What are we talking about when we speak of Indian women? We see a country with a strong involvement of women in the independence movement, and then for some decades, their disappearance from public view. In this, India is no different from many countries in the world. We see a country that created, like many countries that came into being that time as democracies, a strong and very egalitarian constitution, and in later years, some good laws, which over time changed and became better and became more egalitarian. And here, I think we are quite similar to you, because over time, your laws have also changed and become more egalitarian. We see a women's movement that is dynamic and strong, that questioned the state, that fought for change, and that was successful in both demanding and gaining some changes. But we also see large numbers of women who are oppressed, discriminated against, and we see many world-recognized indicators which lead us to think that the situation of women must be really terrible. Just yesterday, I was talking to a young journalist who said to me that she thought India was a terribly dangerous country for women. And many other conversations that I've had in the last day or so have brought this point home to me, how people perceive India to be not a country for women. And also we see a country that is filled with stories of change that women are making on the ground, the ways in which they are fighting to fulfill their dreams, and we see their courage and we see their resilience. What then is the truth of Indian women? I want to suggest that there is not one single truth, that all of these realities make up the reality of the lives of Indian women. Why then, we must ask ourselves, does the perception exist that ours is one of the worst countries for women in the world and that we live lives of terrible suffering? There is no doubt that on some indicators we do not fare well at all. Our workforce participation rates are falling. We are not doing well in removing poverty. Okay, women need to make huge improvements in literacy. Comparisons with Taiwan, where you have addressed many of these things, will show how important it is to make this change. But there are other statistics that tell a different story. I spoke earlier of the law that brought in quotas or reservations for women in elected posts at village level. As a result of this law, today we have 1.3 million women in positions of elected power at village and municipal levels, something that I think no other country has done. I'm not sure why this kind of statistic does not influence how India is perceived. But I want to present to you another statistic that further complicates this picture. We are widely perceived to be a country that is terribly violent towards its women. Indeed, India is often called the rape capital of the world. So let's look at rape statistics in the world. I have in front of me figures from the United Nations Office of Drug and Crimes. These are figures that are about 6 years old, but I don't think they've changed drastically. And these figures describe what is called the rate of rape per 100,000 people in different countries in the world. Here are the figures. India is 1.8. The United States is 27.3. The United Kingdom is 28.8. Sweden is 63.5. And South Africa is 120. I'm sure this comes as a surprise to you. It did to me too, but it made me think, what is happening here? I don't think the answer is that as an Indian, I should be congratulating myself and saying, well, things are not so bad in India. After all, we are 1.8 and the US is 27.3. That means they have at least 25 times more rape than we do. No, I don't think that is the answer, because as far as I'm concerned, and I imagine for all of you too, even one rape is one too many. But certainly when you see something like these figures, they force you to think about the wide gap between public perception and the reality. If other countries have a much higher rate of rape than India, why is it that we don't hear this? Or is it that these statistics are wrong? All such information is based on reported cases, and we know well that in many of our countries, including India, many cases do not get reported. But even if you take the Indian figure and multiply it by a factor of 10, which is usually what is believed to be the factor that you need to multiply to get an accurate figure, you are still looking at a figure that is quite low in comparison with others. What does this mean? Sorry, I'm jumping now because I'm losing time. I have to say that I don't have an answer to this. You may or may not agree with this, but I want to suggest something here. One possible way of looking at things that can give us a more nuanced view. In India, we have a very strong and dynamic women's movement. Since the early 70s, when the movement against sexual violence began, women activists have kept alive the discussion, particularly on rape. It is their belief that it is necessary to create public pressure for change to happen. As a result of their efforts, there have been 2 major changes in the law, and the fact of sexual violence has now become speakable. The silence on it is being broken. This is something that is widely acknowledged and acknowledged as an issue that needs to be addressed. In December of 2012, the capital city of Delhi, a young woman, a medical student, was gang raped in a moving bus, and later she died from her injuries. Outraged at this tragic incident, hundreds of thousands of people across the country came out to protest. They included men, women, families, rich, poor, everyone. The government was forced to step in, and one of the things that happened was that the law on rape was changed in very fundamental ways. Since that moment, women's groups have ensured that sexual violence does not disappear from the public eye. They have kept up the pressure on government, on media, on people, and one of the results has been the enormous attention the media pay to this. The newspapers are full of such reports every day. For us in India, we can see that one of the positive results of such media attention is that more and more women are coming out to report cases. That the police, who were earlier indifferent and sometimes even hostile, are now being forced to be much more responsible in filing cases. But one of the negative results of this is that when people read such reports, they begin to believe that sexual crimes are rampant, and this is the only reality of our world, and that is so not true. Why does rape not get reported so widely in the media in other countries? After all, if the rate of rape is so high, say in Sweden and the United States, why do we not see reports about it in the media? And here I would like to suggest another answer. I'm not sure if this is the right thing, but here is my guess. I think that in many other countries, what has happened is that over time, they have developed good law enforcement mechanisms and indeed good laws, so that when and if a sexual crime happens, it gets reported to the police and is dealt with by the law. It does not make news in the same way as murder and robbery get reported, and if such crimes and do not make news. If such crimes remain untalked of, surely that doesn't mean that they don't exist. And here I want to bring in just one other thing before I close. There's so much talk about the recent Me Too campaign that has had its beginnings in the US. What does this campaign tell us? I find it very interesting because to me, one of the things that it reveals is how difficult it is, even today, even in the so-called developed countries, to speak about sexual violence. So many of the women who are now speaking out are well-known, powerful celebrities, but even for them, speaking out was difficult. It tells me that sexual violence is still rampant and is still silenced. And importantly, that it does not only happen in countries like ours, but everywhere. I'd like to draw my talk to an end, and I'd like to end it as I began with a story. Some 10 or 15 years ago, a group of women, poor village women, mostly from the very bottom of the social ladder, got together to start a village newspaper they called Khabar Leheriya. They put whatever money they had together, they got the help of an NGO, and they began. They went out to the village, reported little stories, charming things, funny things, serious things. Over time, their newspaper became a place where people could talk about problems in the village and find solutions to them through public discussion. For this, they were attacked by local men who began to fear them, but they were appreciated by others, and many regional and national level newspapers began to use their services to file stories for which they could not afford to send out a reporter. In this way, the women became stronger. Today, their newspaper has more than doubled in circulation. They have received many awards, and all the villagers around them feel this is their paper. Stories like this, and there are thousands of these in India, are to me as important as the stories of violence, And they are as much a part of understanding India and Indian women as the stories of violence are. Every country, no matter how advanced, I believe, and this is a terrible thing to believe, but I do believe that it is true, finds its own levels of discrimination and violence towards its women. Because as we know now, patriarchy has very deep roots and a great deal of social sanction. The battle to change this is not easy, as much of the time we are battling people we care for, people we love, or those whose ideologies we share. It is something that we all need to realize is a difficult but necessary battle. Taiwan and India, in that sense, have many things in common. Both countries fought off a history of colonialism. You with mainland China and Japan, we with the British. Both created egalitarian constitutions, and yet both implemented laws that were discriminatory to women. Over the years, you have amended and changed those laws, as have we. Your changes in family laws have now given women an equal status in the family. Your domestic violence acts deal with a much silenced issue. Your recognition of marital rape is so important. We too have implemented laws which have given women more rights. In inheritance, in child custody, in divorce, in marriage, we have a Domestic Violence Act, we have a new law on sexual violence, we have a Sexual Harassment Act. But there is still a long way to go. And I think that it is that goal that we need to focus on rather than point fingers or be fearful of other cultures. And in closing, I really just want to say this. The discrimination that exists in the world towards women is a very serious, very long-standing, and very difficult to address problem. It is not a competition in which some countries are ahead of others and can point fingers and say, look, we've done this and you haven't, therefore you are terrible and we are much better. But unfortunately, that is how it gets seen. Much more important is to see how each country, with its history, its own particular context, has taken this issue and tried to deal with it. And much more important is to see not only the statistics, but what lies behind the statistics, which are the human stories, and what lies behind the attempts to change the realities that women experience. And if you do that, you will find a much more nuanced, a much more complete, and a much more real story that is one of the truths, not the only truth, of women in any country, including India. And this poster that you see on the wall is something that many of us, on the screen, feminists in India, see as something that gives us another human right, which has been denied to us and to many women in the world, that is the right to leisure. So sit down, put your feet up, put on the television if you like, read a book if you like, drink a cup of tea, drink a glass of wine, and just chill after all the hard work that we've done. Thank you.